Да здравствует наш великий Сталин! Ура!
Two totalitarian giants, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, had sworn to carve up Poland between them. In the midst of this betrayal, one man held supreme command, Rydz-Śmigły-Rydz. Celebrated by some as a national savior, condemned by others as the man who abandoned his army. His story is the story of Poland's last stand in 1939. Imagine the man who'd forge modern Poland, gone in an instant, and the nation left scrambling to find his heir. On 12th of May 1935, Marshal Józef Piłsudski, Independence's founding father and the army's driving force, passed away. Two generals vied to fill his shoes, the charismatic, politically ambitious Kazimierz Sosnkowski and the steady Rydz-Śmigły-Rydz, celebrated for calm command in the previous war against the Soviets. Piłsudski's last will named Śmigły Inspector General, but President Mościcki went further. On 11th of November 1936, he crowned Śmigły-Rydz a Marshal of Poland, casting him as Piłsudski's successor and the living symbol of a strong, united and ready nation. From the barracks rose a new song. Nikt nam nie zrobi nic, bo z nami Śmigły-Rydz. No one can harm us, Śmigły-Rydz is with us. An echo of that promise, with Śmigły at the helm, Poland believed itself invincible. But Śmigły knew that Poland was not invincible, and set out to prepare it for the storm to come. Śmigły's vision rejected the idea of a passive, fortress-bound army. Instead, he shaped a force designed for operational maneuver, capable of counterattacks, rapid redeployment, and flexible defense. By 1939, Poland fielded 30 active infantry divisions, supported by 90 infantry regiments and 30 light artillery regiments, with additional heavy artillery units forming. 11 cavalry brigades, not relics of the past, but mobile strike forces trained for reconnaissance, flanking, and deep penetration. 2 motorized brigades and 3 mountain brigades, giving the army reach across varied terrain. A robust communications network, including 30 signal companies and radio telegraph battalions, enabling real-time coordination across dispersed fronts. This wasn't a static army, it was a layered, mobile force built to fight on its own terms. An early form of the territorial forces was formed from 1937 onwards, the Obrona Narodowa. It was a part-time force made up of regionals knowing their territory. It was made up of infantry and cavalry regiments called Krakusi in honor of the Kosciuszko uprising. This was a defensive element of the Polish armed forces. Śmigły's staff poured resources into the Polish aviation industry as well, centered around PZL factories in Okęcie and Rzeszów. These plants produced 352 PZL P-11C fighters, Poland's primary interceptor, outdated by 1939, but flown by elite pilots. Also 92 PZL-37 Łoś, or Bull Moose bombers, sleek twin-engine aircraft capable of precision strikes. 2 new and highly modern PZL-38 Wilk heavy fighters were built as well. A total of 6 air regiments fielding 15 fighter squadrons, 18 reconnaissance squadrons, and 17 line squadrons, supported by balloon battalions for observation and artillery spotting. The plans were very ambitious, and by 1942, Poland was supposed to have an air force of over 800 planes, not counting training and logistic planes. Though outnumbered, the Polish Air Force was well trained and strategically deployed to support ground operations and delay enemy advances. Poland's navy, though modest, was modern and strategically positioned. Under Śmigły's oversight, it included destroyers like ORP Błyskawica and ORP Grom, among the fastest in the world at the time. Submarines such as ORP Orzel and ORP Semp, tasked with disrupting German naval movements. Coastal batteries and naval aviation units defending the Hel Peninsula and Gdynia. The fleet's mission was clear: defend Poland's Baltic axis, support coastal operation, and tie down German naval assets. Recognizing the threat of mechanized warfare, he secured a dramatic expansion of the national production of tanks and equipment. From 1939 to 1942, Poland, according to the 15-year plan, was to really strongly modernize its army. On the ground, Śmigły backed the indigenous 7-tonowy Polski program, light tanks armed with 37mm Bofors guns, plus TK's Tinkets. Many retrofitted with 20mm autocannons, formed a mobile armored reserve that outgunned the German Panzer I and II in direct firepower. These steps reflected his conviction that cutting-edge hardware, properly deployed, could offset Poland's numerical and geographical vulnerabilities. In 1939, Poland had around 475 tanks in total. Let's not forget the public's enthusiasm. Many Poles remembered the time when Poland was partitioned and rejoiced in a long yearned-for independent republic. But the youth, born in independent Poland, was passionate about its homeland.
Witajcie nam na polskiej ziemi.
Szliśmy do was z zagranicy, gnani tęsknotą do macierzy i radością ogromną, że uściśniemy wasze bratnie dłonie.
The Scouting Association, Young Poland Movement, and many other youth movements promoted civic duty and wanted to prepare for the tests and ambitions to come.
Pierwszy zjazd przewodniczących obwodów obozu Zjednoczenia Narodowego zaszczycił swoją obecnością wódz naczelny marszałek Śmigły-Rydz.
The Camp for National Unity, a new political party advocating for Poland's defense and Śmigły's leadership, together with all other political parties in parliament from across the political spectrum, agreed on a common policy regarding defense.
W dziele obrony narodowej, w obecności pana prezydenta Rzeczypospolitej oraz wodza naczelnego, utworzony został ogólnopolski Komitet Pożyczki Obrony Przeciwlotniczej. W wydanej tego dnia odezwie komitet nawołuje do ofiarności na rzecz rozbudowy armii powietrznej.
The nation enthusiastically supported Poland's defense with funds, and even the poorest gave what they could spare. What was achieved in under 20 years is an impressive monument to the ambition, optimism, and merit of the Second Polish Republic.
Pożyczka obrony przeciwlotniczej przeistoczyła się w wielką manifestację jedności narodowej. Biura komisarzy pożyczki mieszczące się w lokalach LOPP są w tych dniach świadkami wielu wzruszających dowodów ofiarności.
In the spring of 1939, as Hitler demanded Poland join the Anti-Comintern Pact, Warsaw quietly doubled down on its ties to London and Paris. By August, mutual defense treaties with Britain and France were in hand. The traditional Polish-French alliance from 1921 was secured. Yet securing guarantees was only half the battle. The other was proving Poland would actually use its army. Rather than fall back behind the Vistula and San rivers, Marshal Śmigły-Rydz positioned his 5 frontier armies in a continuous line along the German and Slovak borders. On the surface, this looked like a courting disaster. Fewer natural obstacles, longer lines to hold, more exposed flanks. But Śmigły's reasoning was as much political as it was strategic. He knew that if Poland ceded even a mile of ground before the Germans struck, French public opinion and the British Parliament might as well conclude, why die for a country that cannot even protect its own borders? By standing at the border, Śmigły hoped to signal unequivocally to Paris and London that Poland was serious about resisting any incursion, undercut German propaganda framing Poland as unwilling to defend its frontiers, bolster the morale of troops and civilians by fighting on home ground rather than appearing to hide behind rivers, and force Hitler to launch his assault immediately before he could redeploy or fully mobilize. This forward defense posture carried risks. It stretched Polish lines, limited depth for counterattacks, and left little room for maneuver. Critics would later argue that a river line defense might have blunted the blitzkrieg, but from Śmigły's perspective, the border was not a liability. It was a statement of intent. Poland would fight at once, and by doing so, compel its allies to honor their promises. The French and British guaranteed to begin their offensive 15 days after mobilizing their armies.
Halo, halo, tu Warszawa i wszystkie rozgłośnie Polskiego Radia. Dziś rano o godzinie 5:40 oddziały niemieckie przekroczyły granicę polską, łamiąc pakt o nieagresji. Bombardowano szereg miast. Za chwilę usłyszą Państwo komunikat specjalny. A więc wojna.
The sky over Poland darkened at dawn on September 1st, 1939, when Wehrmacht bombers and panzers thundered across the border under Fall Weiss, Germany's master plan to obliterate the Polish armies before they could fall back behind the Vistula. 3 prongs would converge on Warsaw: the 4th and 3rd armies from East Prussia, Army Group South's 8th and 10th, and 14th armies through Silesia, plus Slovak allied units from the Carpathians. Army Group North under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, with Günther von Kluge as deputy, was to smash through Pomerania and Mazovia. Army Group South, led by Gerd von Rundstedt and Walter von Reichenau, would drive northward from Silesia. Their orders were blunt: encircle and destroy Poland's frontier armies west of the Vistula, then wheel east to reduce Warsaw at a single stroke. All that while hoping that France and Britain remain neutral. Yet the Poles had chosen to meet the blitzkrieg on the border. Frontier divisions, cavalry brigades, and anti-tank detachments delayed the spearheads at places like Westerplatte and Mokra. Every hour gained was precious. As German columns funneled through cutthroat gaps, Polish engineers demolished bridges and laid mines, forcing steel-track juggernauts to crawl rather than race towards the heartland. By September 4th, German armor had closed to within 60 kilometers of Warsaw, but the main Polish armies, Poznań in the north and Pomorze in the west, remained intact. Hitler's commanders believed that the net would soon snap shut behind them, isolating those armies from the Vistula's east bank. Instead, Poznań Army's General Tadeusz Kutrzeba and Pomorze Army's General Władysław Portnowski elected counterattack. On 9th of September, along the Bzura River, southwest of Łódź, Polish horsemen and infantry surged into the flank of General Johannes Błaskowic's 8th Army. What began as a localized thrust swelled into the Battle of Bzura. the largest Polish offensive of the campaign. For 10 days, the Poles battered German lines, seized supply depots, and freed encircled units. Thousands slipped through gaps, blazing with anti-tank fire, and renewed hope surged in Warsaw's garrisons. Alarmed, Rundstedt and Manstein diverted panzers from the Warsaw axis to pin down the Polish juggernaut. The very force meant to crush the defenders of the capital was now deployed to seal Kutreba's trap. Luftwaffe bombers and Reichenau's infantry closed the ring by September 16th, but by then over 20,000 Polish troops had withdrawn east of the Bzura, abandoning the battlefield, but preserving their regiments for the fight to come. As Germans labored to extinguish the Bzura pocket, Warsaw's forts and Modlin's fortress still blazed with anti-aircraft fire. The city defenses, though under siege since September 8th, held off every assault. General Juliusz Ruma's infantry and Rumelian counterattacks repelled probing attacks by Blaskowitz and Kluge's heavy artillery, denying the Wehrmacht its prize. What Fallweis had promised, a clean knockout of Poland's armies west of the Vistula, collapsed in the face of Polish audacity and tactical risk. The sacrifice at Bzura was not a rout, but a rescue, a heroic gamble that fractured the German timetable, diverted their best units, and kept Warsaw standing on September 16, long enough for Polish soldiers to fight another day. In conclusion, we can say, taking a look at the goals of both the Polish and German general staffs, who achieved and who failed at their goals. The Germans intended to crush the Polish army west of the Vistula fast, while keeping France and England neutral. At both these goals, they failed. Meanwhile, Śmigły's plan of turning the war into a world war, involving the Allies and keeping the Polish army intact, was a success. Warsaw and most other major cities were fighting unconquered. Equipment from France was supposed to arrive through Allied Romania. All that was required now for a victory was the Allied counteroffensive. General Stachniewicz, a member of Śmigły's general staff, remembered that on that night, 16th of September, they opened a good wine, celebrating the successful campaign. Before the war started, France and Britain guaranteed the offensive taking place 15 days after mobilization began. In bitter irony, that date was supposed to be September 17th, the very next morning. It was on that night of celebration that the French military envoy in Poland, General Faury, brought bad news. The French offensive was called off, and the few French units that had entered Germany retreated behind the Maginot Line. The offensive was now planned for the 21st of September, and Faury asked General Stachniewicz whether Poland would hold out for that long. General Stachniewicz assured that of course, Warsaw was still standing, the peninsula of Hell was still standing, so was most of Poland. Germany had not beaten Poland. It was a twisted irony of fate that an offensive would take place the very next morning. The Soviet Red Army, in accordance with the Hitler-Stalin Pact signed in August, crossed the Polish border on September 17, 1939. It was this backstabbing invasion that sealed the hopes for a victory. The Soviets invaded with 600,000 troops, including around 5,000 tanks and around 3,000 fighter planes. In order to save Poland's army for the fight to come, Śmigły took another difficult decision. He issued a strict order not to fight against the Red Army unless engaged directly, or any attempts at disarming the Polish army. The Polish Border Protection Corps, led by Wilhelm Orlik-Rückemann, Ulan regiments and Polish civilians showed heroic resistance against the Soviets in many towns and cities. Wilno, the cradle of great Poles, Pilsudski's hometown, defended itself from September 17th to September 19th. From the very first day of the invasion, the Red Army committed war crimes, often forgotten, massacring the defenders of Grodno, murdering Polish academics, officers, landowners, and committing massive rape and destruction. On September 28th, Germany and the Soviet Union signed a pact of friendship, holding a large victory parade together in Brest nad Bugiem. By that time, Marshal Śmigły-Rydz had activated the Romanian bridgehead contingency. As the Germans and Soviet pincers closed, 120,000 Polish soldiers fought delaying actions, then slipped south across the Carpathians into Allied Romania. The plan mirrored Serbia's retreat in World War I into Greece, intended as a fighting withdrawal to a friendly port and a safe haven for reforming abroad. Once inside Romania, however, diplomatic pressure from Berlin forced Bucharest to disarm its Polish allies. Śmigły-Rydz, President Mościcki, and the core of the High Command were interned. At the same time, most frontline units were allowed to continue onwards to France and Britain, there to reconstitute the Polish army in the west. There, General Sikorski, a critic of the government, took over as Prime Minister and Commander-in-Chief. It was also under his pressure that Śmigły was not released. On October 10, 1939, despite still many Polish units fighting, Germany and the USSR declared their campaign a victory. The legendary unit of Major Hubal would not be destroyed until April of 1940. What is the legacy of the September campaign? How should we judge Edward Śmigły-Rydz and his leadership as Commander-in-Chief? By the communist government after the war, installed by the Soviets, he was of course portrayed as a traitor and a loser, who failed to wage war against Germany. Which is understandable considering they were installed by the ones that led to Poland's defeat in the first place. Communist historiography censored any mention of the Soviet invasion of September 17th, and the West largely forgot it, instead viewing it as a German victory, when in fact it was clearly a Soviet one. The Germans were unable to capture Warsaw, and the city was under siege until September 27th, when President Starzyński decided that in light of the Soviet invasion, all hope for an Allied offensive were gone, and further bloodshed should be avoided. By his rival Sikorski, Śmigły was portrayed as the one who abandoned the army. The Germans saw him as a rogue leader of a seasoned state. All their propaganda surrounding the Marshal and Poland has left its mark until today. Objectively, we can say today that he was a good leader. He successfully defended against the German army, against great odds, and considering his return to Warsaw as a simple soldier of the underground in 1941 and death in December of that year, we cannot call him a coward. It was thanks to his leadership that the Polish army lived to fight for the rest of the war, and his efforts that made the creation of the Home Army possible. This video is dedicated to the Polish heroes of September 39 and their Commander-in-Chief, Marshal Śmigły-Rydz. And I also intentionally recorded to upload it on September 17th. I want to end this video by reminding everyone that the Soviets did not simply profit from the invasion of Poland. They were the invader.